You're listening to Spill the Sea with Ashwati Ramesh.
Hi, Mr. Srinivas. Thank
Hi.
you so much for being here today. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to Copper and Cloves, which is the plant based cafe who have let us use their beautiful studio space. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Good morning to you as well. Thanks for inviting.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Srinivas, before we get into the details, would you like to give us a quick brief of what Digitized Energy actually does?
So what we do digital asset management for solar farms and wind farms, largely utility scale large plants. We take data from from the power plants and then analyze the data to see patterns for any anomalies that might come from them, and then inform our clients about those problems, and so that they can troubleshoot them. Leads to better efficiencies at the plant, and yeah, that's the main function.
Right. And I think you focus on such a key piece in this story, right? The energy story, which is energy management, energy efficiency. And how did you kind of stumble upon this? I know you've been in the industry for over a decade. What is your journey before founding Digitized Energy, and how did you get into the renewable space?
Yeah. So the story sort of starts in 2010 when I joined a textile firm. The textile firm had 3 wind farms and wind turbines, and then I was taking a look at those turbines and looking at the finances of those. In the meantime, I got a chance to meet up with Greenco Group at that time, and then they hired me as a CFO for their wind division. I was with them for some time, then moved on to what is today called Vena Energy India. From 2013 to 2020, I was with them. Worked there initially as a CFO and then as a CEO. They are during that period from scratch. We developed about 700 megawatts of operating assets, 500 in wind, 200 in solar. That's where, so from 2010 to 2020, I got a ringside view of the business of putting up wind farms and solar farms, operating them, etc. Uh, what also gave me a lot of I mean, what I appreciate about that space was that it seemed to be a ever expanding space,
Yeah.
and hence I always thought that I could still spend 10 more years while the space is still expanding, and sort of make use of my understanding of the space to do some commerce. That's sort of the broad picture I
Right.
had of the space. Yeah. So,
And how is the transition between now becoming a founder yourself? You were with corporates for a while. How are you finding that?
it's always I think the most telling part of a transitioning out of being an employee, that how do you handle the fact that you can't walk up to somebody and complain, or you can't expect a larger umbrella to take care of you,
Yeah.
and you have to take care of everything yourself. Having said that, I think so far I have felt that I've been largely anticipated the issues of being of running things on my own, and stumbling upon problems upon problems upon problems, and then solving them as they come. Some of them are unsolvable; you just sidestep them. But I guess that's the most difficult part. That it appears at times that you don't have an ecosystem that supports you to solve your issues. But I think you have to look beyond the employer for such solutions. And so that's what an entrepreneur will typically end up doing. That yeah, after you've sort of used yourself and your organization, you look beyond it and say that, do I have partners? Do I have friends? Do I have people who can solve my problems? They need not necessarily be from the same organization that I am.
Or even
And
the same industry.
yeah, absolutely. I think it's and then there I think you count your blessings, because there are enough people who support you, enough people that you gained the goodwill of over the past few years, who stand up and say that they encourage you, and not always necessarily in the manner that you always want, but for sure there's been a lot of encouragement from people I've known who've sort of told me that they find it fascinating that I'm doing what I'm doing, and that sort of gives me a lot of this thing. Again, the transition is always difficult. There is always a sword on your head, thinking that you could potentially go back, and should you? And it's a question that you weigh every day. For now, at least, I think the weight has been on the side of continuing to be an entrepreneur. It's been very exciting.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. And continuing on that line, you do have a team that you put together now. How did you end up, say, meeting Mr. Venkat, who is also a co-founder at Digitised Energy?
So, Venkat has been my batchmate from my MBA school,
Okay.
and we both knew each other for some time then. And after that, we've been sort of on in touch and off for long periods of time. When we started building a software in Vena Energy India, that time I reached out to Venkat to check whether he'd be interested in doing it as a vendor for us, and that conversation fructified, and he helped develop something at Vena, which is very useful for that organization. So when we came out in 2020, I again started talking to him and starts giving him the idea of potentially building a similar tool on a third-party basis for wider customers, and float it commercially. He seemed to, both of us had enough conviction that it was a good idea. He knew it from a technology and technical standpoint. I knew it from a business standpoint. And I think that's sort of been one of the fuels that has kept us running all these 4 years, that both of us have enough conviction that within ourselves we'll find resources to build something. Yeah, and that's so. Then I think the rest of the team has fallen in place in terms of various connects that we've had from earlier. Venkat brought together a bunch of people that he's worked with earlier. I was able to talk to some people in the industry, and they started working with me, and that's how the journey happened, and the team came together. Again, you just have to be thankful that they've all showed the faith that they have. Luckily, the last 4 years, the core of our team has remained together. We've not lost too many people, and hence there is a sense of continuity in what we do, which is very heartening, so that we don't have to uh, keep solving the same people problem over and over.
Right.
Touch wood, I hope that continues.
Great. So, Mr. Srinivas, I know you've spent quite a bit of time in this space. You've seen the previous cycle as well. And obviously, from then to now, renewables, the share in power generation has been increasing progressively. And it's moving more towards digitalization, decentralization. The topic of energy efficiency is coming. So, how do you see this playing out globally as well as in India?
Okay, pretty large question. Just try to break it into smaller parts. I think digitization or digitalization is a fairly common concept across all industries, because technology has become so much powerful, cloud has become so much powerful, computing has become so much powerful. So there is hardly any space which has not been impacted by it. To that extent, it is a fairly common phenomenon across everything that we do, right from the retail side to the everyday life to industrial side, etc. What is what is slightly the more specific use cases for renewables come from the fact that the power getting generated is dependent on resources which are variable, and hence you can't predict what's happening tomorrow, in the next 10 minutes. So you try to use technology to predict it, and whatever you try to predict will always have an element of error. And that's sort of the starting point for using technology, saying that can we make the entire supply system of electricity generation to consumption more steady. In effect, electricity is perishable unless you put a storage system, and storage systems for long periods of time were very costly, and nowadays they're becoming slightly cheaper and cheaper, and hopefully at a later stage from where they're very, very cheap and can become, but until then, it'll be very relevant to ensure that you're able to predict how much power is getting generated, and technology is sort of one of the best enablers for that. Then I think there is the very interesting question of how do you run a network of varying supply sources with and map them with varying consumption sources. So there are certain scheduling, forecasting, and other use cases of technology that come on that side. And people are doing, some of the other people in the space are doing a great job of working in it. The network operators are doing work on the pricing side, so that they can understand, so that they can incentivize the chain to produce and generate power at the right time. So that's sort of the the play that's happening across in this as a value chain. Between India and the global play, I guess there are certain differences of scale and primary sources of power. With renewables, for instance, in India, Rajasthan and that side is a fantastic source for solar
Solar.
power. Tamil Nadu and the Southwest has been a great source of wind power.
Yeah.
And how do you then use network and technology to ensure that that power is delivered to the rest of the country is an interesting question. Um, One part of it is to run a grid better. The other part of it is to decentralize it so that uh, your focus on investing in the grid is lower and lower. And it's an interesting play that's developing there as to whether each geography can produce its own solar power or not. And again, there are various regulations that are coming in, whether net metering, is it good, bad, and then initially they started off with systems of what is called feed-in tariff. Nowadays, they are ensuring that they are doing a bidding system so that people can bid for the lowest price of power. But all of it has been more in terms of pushing through and incentivizing the use of renewable energy.
Right.
And in the last, at least in India, in the last 5-7 years, it's reached a stage where the entire thing seems irreversible. That it's become very clear that there is a certain amount of clear self-sufficiency in trying to build your own solar and wind ecosystem, along with potentially batteries. And uh, hopefully that continues. It sort of takes forward both the story for renewable energy and climate tech, and hopefully the use is good enough for all of us to wade through this ecosystem and build something ourselves.
So you did mention solar and wind. How are you seeing this power mix sort of evolve? What are the other renewables that we can tap into, and how do you see that evolving in India?
So wind and solar would be mainstays in terms of the fact that they are available everywhere. Again within limits, but practically every large piece of land will have a certain amount of wind flowing through it and a certain amount of solar
Yeah.
falling upon it. Other than that, there is biomass, there is geothermal, there is tidal, which is the sort of offshore use of the waves. Similarly, there's offshore wind.
Yeah.
All of these are very relevant. Some of these are very topical and resource dependent. Geothermal, for instance, is use of uh, the high temperature steam within the earth, and you can use sort of pull it out and use it, uh, which again will depend on whether that's available and can you sort of tap into it. There are some experiments going in, say, using large mine shafts in Australia and hence sort of develop a gravity-based system. And
Interesting.
so, again, I don't know the specifics, but seems to work a lot more in Australia. In India, the other case is pumped hydro, where you actually take a difference in heights and then build a reservoir from where water is pumped downwards, and then you use wind or solar to pump the water back into the reservoir, and then again drop it from there. Again, uh, the requirement there is the difference in height, and the ability to build reservoirs at both the ends. So there'll be quite a few such locations which might come up over a period of time, and they will become the battery banks or the storage banks for wind and solar. So that's sort of the ecosystem of energy sources that I can immediately talk about. Interesting stuff. When it comes in and energy becomes stable enough, then again, renewable will start challenging conventional power in terms of being stable and being able to generate when required.
And a lot of these sources of renewable power, I think the question also comes up that is it economical? Because, for example, solar needs a lot of land, hydro needs a lot of capex. What are your thoughts on that? And maybe you can answer this next. What are your thoughts on nuclear as well?
I think for starters, at least I can keep off the nuclear conversation. I'm not too deep in
Okay.
it.
Okay.
That's fine. I mean, seems very interesting and exciting, and I think um, we'll only watch. At least I'll only watch how it goes. Don't know
Right.
much about it. On the solar and wind, and so basically, I think the biggest indicator of uh, how useful it is commercially is its own pricing, and pricing has consistently fallen over a period of time. It has come to a stage where uh, very clear in terms of tangible numbers, it seems to be cheaper than coal. Obviously, people will bring in a conversation about quality of power, coal being available whenever you call it versus solar being available only when sun is there, and then make a statement of disparity. And the other thing that's happened parallelly is that in India, we've seen a few bids around what is called FDRE, fixed dispatch renewable energy, and there they are trying to price power for specific time windows. And again, those prices have discovered to be exciting enough to continue to work on them.
Yeah.
As battery technology becomes more commercial and more potentially cheaper, uh, wind plus solar plus battery hopefully will come within the pricing range of any other source that we have
Right.
and become useful enough. Again, I mean the capex and all are conversations around certain specific features in the sense that how long does it take to develop a project, how much money do you spend upfront. But the biggest indicator is what do you think is the levelized cost of that energy over the lifetime of that asset. And I think consistently the discovery of prices has been low enough to, which is what I said, that it seems that we've reached a point where there is enough irreversibility about this. Uh, I think the last puzzle to solve is, can renewable energy itself become stable power, and can it uh, and such that it doesn't need conventional power for supplying base load.
Right.
And that's a problem that the various parts of the globe are sort of trying to solve. For today, there are clear cases where the naysayers are saying that there's too much solar power in the daytime, and then in the nighttime there is none. So, how useful is that? And the guys who are trying to solve it are saying, can we use any other storage system to ensure that there is better storage of all this energy that's coming up in the morning times or the daytimes, and use it when required. I guess when that final system sort of gets solved, if it does, and a lot of people that believe that it's not if but when, then, as I said, people will then start looking at conventional and power and start saying whether we can absolutely replace them or not. And then it'll just be a matter of cost of replacement and the
Right.
time to replacement. People who are within the industry, we all believe that we can see the shape of fixed dispatchable power sort of more clearly, and we just have to wait for the contours of the pricing to emerge, such that it's more beneficial than the other pricing, and then from there on it will take off.
Right. And just to take a step back, for our listeners, If you can just walk us through a quick brief on the value chain of, from generation to how we actually receive power.
So yeah, the generators are, so there'll be broadly two types of generators: people who are called IPPs, independent power producers, and then there can be any retail person, like somebody who's got a rooftop solar or their own source of supply. So in most of the cases, people who have their own source of supply use it themselves, like a diesel genset, etc. They'll use it within the house and be happy. With solar, thankfully, people have come up with a concept of net metering, where you can put a solar rooftop and then propose to sell it to the grid when you're not using it. So they also become generators. So that's sort of the layer of generators, independent power producers, and I'm mainly talking renewables here.
Yeah.
Households as well as independent power producers, and then they sell it to the various grids in their locality. So they tap into the grid and supply power to that point in the grid. Typically, these grids are run by transmission companies, and they price their transmission networks depending on for the generators as well as the consumers, depending on how much of the how it is getting used. So their capex gets defrayed over the life of the asset, depending on the amount of power that people are pumping into it and pumping out of it. That goes into the discoms. The discoms then take the power that is being pumped into the transmission companies' networks, and then they sell it to the ultimate consumers, whether industrial, again, various grades. In India, there is agriculture, industrial, commercial, retail, etc. And there is, various people will have varying prices, various geographies will have varying prices for all these users. And so they are the final guys who are actually pumping revenue back into the grid, and ensure that revenue is what sort of keeping us running on an operating basis. So that money comes to the discoms, they collect it, they give the share of the money that's due to the transmission companies, and the IPPs get their money also from the discoms for the amount that they have pumped in. In between, to sort of promote the or to push the solar development, the central government has created a nodal agency called SECI, which is Solar Energy Corporation of India, which becomes the layer between the discoms and the IPPs. So what they do is that they parcel out the various bids, and once the IPPs bid in and say that this is what we are going to supply to you, then they sign back-to-back agreements with power sale agreements with the discoms, so that discoms don't have to go about discovering the IPPs and their pricing. That's sort of a quick overview of how power goes from one end to the other, with certain how commercially it sort of gets paid out.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I think that makes it more clear. And just to, before we go into what exactly digitized energy does and how it works, we were talking about this earlier as well, about how energy efficiency is so important. And we did touch upon this in a previous episode with Kazam as well, where we talked about losses in this value chain, right? Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Losses in the value chain, like any other, I think at every generation point and at every interaction point, there will be losses. So the generators, if they, depending on the technology they use and the best manner in which they use that technology, they will generate, say, X percentage of the expected power. And then when they pump it into the grid, then a certain part of the power is lost on account of the fact that they have to carry it over a line to the grid. The grid itself, depending on whether the power is injected at one point and getting used at another, will have a certain loss, because you are transmitting power over a length of wire. And then again, there are losses when it's tapped into by the customer, and again, the inefficiencies of the customer's usage in terms of whether they're using the best equipment, etc. At each of these friction points, people are working on efficiencies. So we, for instance, work at the generation end for solar and wind. The schedulers and forecasters are working on uh, trying to ensure that the expectation for the grid is properly set so that the grid can do its own planning about where to procure its power from. And then I think a lot of the transmission losses and distribution losses are largely down to how the kind of equipment that's used. And one way that people are trying to reduce it is by going for higher and higher voltages. So we've moved from 22 to 66 to 220 and higher and higher. Nowadays, some of the lines are built around 765, etc., which allow the losses to be lower. That's one way of doing it, where you sort of build large networks which are less efficient. The other way is decentralization itself, so where people are putting up their own grid. So that sort of allows them to use it for themselves rather than trying to go through the network and then bring it back to themselves. So that's sort of broadly some of the cases where losses happen and how the grid is sort of.
Right.
Energy efficiency is happening at each place, and like one of the common forms of energy efficiency known is where you try to make a factory or a building more efficient in terms of usage of energy.
Yeah.
And there, it's a mix of retrofitting, better equipment, and ensuring that you're using technology to switch on and switch off the power when required and as required. All of that helps.
Got it. Okay, so Mr. Srinivas, can you also walk us through now how your platform works exactly?
We are a digital asset management platform for solar and wind. Uh, our job is to connect to the plants, collect all the data from there, and basically do two major things. One is look at data and identify patterns and problems faster, and also solve the needle in the haystack problem that there's so much happening at the plant that how do you isolate what exactly you want to see, both in terms of the amount of data that comes in, also in terms of the number of components that are there at the plant. So if amongst 1,000 things, one thing is wrong, then using data to be able to identify that. Once we do that, then we also continue in and ensure that we are relaying this learning in the correct manner to the people at the corporate offices, to the people at the sites. And finally, we are trying to tell that final person who's sitting at the machine as to what might be wrong and what he needs to do in response. When we do that, we try to ensure that we've solved each of the problems in isolation. The person at the plant who's working with the machine needs to be told only what response they need to give. Ensure that we give them enough ability to record any feedback that they want, whether it's a photograph or it's a video or if they want to write notes, etc. Make it all convenient by giving the appropriate mobile sort of solution which allows them to do that. At the corporate level and at the management level, tell them things that they want to know. So the corporate guy wants to know, probably asset manager wants to know what are the number of problems and cross section of issues that's happening across all plants, and whether any specific plant has more issues or what kind of issues at any given point of time. And at the management level, we are telling them what's happening to their broad metrics, whether it's revenue generation, people, etc. And again, we can also go onwards to say connecting with accounts or something and give them a solution. That's sort of the overview of what we do at the plant today. But we have, as a team, we've been in India for long enough, and also we think that we can extend our understanding to Asia and ensure that we are also helping them solve the issues upstream and downstream. So, for instance, energy sale to the customers. So we are actually working with one of our customers to develop an extension that allows them to work on energy sales. to their customers, tell them what's happening. Potentially, in due course, hopefully, we can also build something that helps these generating units to maybe trade energy in real time in a more optimal fashion. Similarly, we also want to go towards the transmission side and say that work on scheduling, forecasting, minimizing the what's in India called the deviation settlement, and ensure that they are running their plants with lower friction in terms of how they interact with the transmission grid. So, so that's sort of the solution that we have. Above and beyond the data, we also want to ensure that we are able to cover um, the element of ensuring that asset management is digitized and well enough. So we are building, um, the workflow also in terms of helping people do their jobs better. So those are the various things that we work on.
Got it. So, how are you sort of integrating with these complex systems? You said, you're working with solar plants, wind plants, and hybrids, and there is a hardware component, whereas you all are the technology provider. If you could elaborate on that a little.
Sure. So our journey of what we are trying to solve starts from where the equipment manufacturers, participation broadly ends, which is that they've put the component at the site. These components are at least designed to ensure that they're gathering all data within the component, are able to communicate, and so they're ready to communicate while they are also measuring the data. What we do then is first ensure that we are able to put together something at the site level such that data from all these components is getting centralized either at a central machine or at a central node, from where it's then pushed to the cloud.
Right.
And cloud is a very powerful solution. It allows us to operate without having to invest in too much of hardware. So effectively, you're just pushing all data to the cloud and using data off there, which allows us to. Some of these resources are also very powerful. Obviously, there's a cost element involved, but they're very powerful in what they can compute and how they can organize the data. Allows us to scale. Today, we handle more than 60 plants efficiently for all our customers, and volumes of data, which is very heavy. Our journey starts from the plant machines, and it sort of reaches some stability when all the data is at the cloud, and then we again build communication systems so that we can go to individual devices, whether the laptops, the mobiles, or the tablets of the customers, and then they can see their data. In this, we also try to ensure that data is separate enough for everybody so that they can just see their part of it.
Right.
And that's where it is.
And what advanced tech are you using to maneuver all of this data that you're collecting and make it actionable for your clients?
People love to talk about, when we talk about such solutions, people love to talk about big data, AI, ML, etc. And then these are things that are very powerful. Effectively, again, they do the job of ensuring that you understand patterns faster, and you are able to isolate in a very large set of data the specific patterns that you want to look at. And we also use that to pretty much reach the same, try to solve the problems for our customers. Additionally, however, industrial systems can also be bettered by ensuring that you have better data collection mechanisms, either in terms of granularity or in terms of sensors that capture specific data. So we try to work with our clients to also have them either invest in that or
Right.
ask their manufacturers to sort of invest in such things. So yeah, those are the things that help us do a better job for our customers.
Okay. And if you could maybe walk us through a specific clients or general
Okay.
a set of clients where your solution has helped them in terms of management, efficiency.
So we have right now 4 customers who are constantly engaged with us for more than a year now, And for them, I guess the thing that we've consistently done and for which they appreciate our work is the fact that we have delivered, or we've sort of shown them how and what are the things that are going wrong. And with one of the customers, we did an end-to-end exercise for a few weeks to see uh, what is it that we are throwing up as anomalies, and how it's helped them. And it's been very clear to them that we've been able to catch anomalies faster and more pinpointedly, so that they can take relevant actions. Whether it's finding out faulty inverters, whether it is finding out faulty power curve patterns in the wind turbines, helping them understand the impact of soiling on their soiling losses on their plants, and help them devise a better cleaning cycle. We've worked on all of that. We've also ensured that the element of talking or the communication between central engineers and the site technicians is embedded into our system, so that so now all of our customers use our workflow to ensure that they are communicating to their site technicians and getting them to do the work.
Right.
So the entire maintenance response and operations response to their plants is being done and captured within our systems, and not just the analytics. So those are things that that have helped them very well.
Right. And security, of course, is a concern, especially when you're handling such
Data.
large amounts of data. How are you maneuvering that?
Yeah, I guess there are enough common lessons learned across whenever things have gone wrong across various um, systems, whether it be in renewables or outside. We've sort of used all those lessons to build more safer systems, whether it's uh, encryption, data encryption, ensuring that data is well partitioned, so that so relevant people can only access their element of data. So again, simple lessons that the only thing you have to take care of is that you're taking time off to pay attention to security, which is uh, in a way invisible and behind the screens. So you can
Right.
keep delivering a lot of front end stuff to your customers. You can show them more zazzy screens and all that, but you also have to take time to ensure that you're building the discipline that's required to for your data to be more secure. So we do sort of do that, and I guess um, it's a constant ask that while you continue to invest in front end and more visible stuff, you have to ensure that you're investing in things that make you more robust,
Yeah.
and but are not necessarily visible, and we have to do that, and that's the discipline that we have to bring up on ourselves.
To talk a little bit more about the customer side, I know a lot of these stakeholders are used to maybe more traditional approaches of working. How do you sort of convince them to adopt a digital management platform?
I think the most difficult part of the journey is the final sale, uh, because digital first is fairly pervasive both in our everyday lives and in industries. I think you use mobiles to book your taxis, you use them for groceries, you use them for buying clothes, everything. I mean, like, and specifically for a person who sort of got exposed to Bangalore, I think people just want to click on the mobile rather than walk, or even pick themselves up and do something. So, and that's sort of fairly getting caught all across all urban places that a mobile phone and a mobile app is very powerful. So that part of the sale is pretty simple. I think everybody realizes that that's where they want to be ultimately. The part of the journey which is a bit of a task is that we need to convince them why us, and we have to take them through, and we have to work with them to. I think, given that we are younger, I think we try to tell them two things. One is that we do a great job already, but at the same time, given that we are younger, I think the aspiration is not to say that we are as fantastic as the oldies in the place, but rather we want to tell them that we will also walk the extra mile with you to solve your problem, rather than give you a cookie cut solution saying that, oh, this is what we can do and not more. And as I said, the idea there is that for India and Asia, there is a huge um, um, opportunity to ensure that your solution is relevant to the specific intricacies of the place. So, whether it's the way that you want to communicate the job to the site technician, whether it's the way that you want to bake in the regulatory environment into your energy sales or into your transmission side, give an estimate of a more real-time estimate and potentially optimize the deviation settlement charges, etc. So those sort of things we continue to ensure that we can work and are building into the system so that our customers are convinced that as they grow and as the regulatory environment responds to these growths, we are also walking along with them to give them a solution that works for them. And that part of the journey takes as much time as it does, because finally every startup is put up against the incumbents, and
Yeah.
in this case, most of these incumbents are from the Western world where they've already done it,
Right.
and hence their claim to competence is the fact that they're already handling so much of volume outside of India. And our job is to make a point that we've today become competent enough to be as good as them for our geography, and we will in due course become better for them for this space. And I think the other final part is, in any B2B environment, is the fact that every decision has to live through the client organization's hierarchy and their timelines and their business exigencies, whether it be their budgeting process or their approval process, and to live through that. I think those to
What
me.
are the lead times like that you've
Oh, wow.
experienced?
So we've had different experiences. We've had a couple of customers with whom we were able to close everything in 3 months, sort of do a pilot and go live and start billing in 3 months. We've had where it's gone on for 6 months odd. We have a case where we've been in working varying degrees of pilots and POCs for a customer for more than 2 years, and still not necessarily at the forefront of breaking through and becoming their partner of choice. So again, um while I might generalize it and say that the journey is 6 to 9 months. Uh, it's it seems that every engagement has its own nuances, and a broad brush doesn't doesn't do justice. But again, I guess the broad answer, I would say, anybody who wants like a simpler answer, I would say 6 to 9 months.
Got it. I think it's definitely one of the biggest challenges, right, that a founder has to go through to try and get the
Yeah.
customers on board, get their validation. But once you have that, I think which is where you all are at, it becomes an easier conversation
Yeah.
for new clients.
Yeah, without doubt. I think just last week we got one of our customers to renew us, one of the biggest customers to renew us after a year of working with them. And it was fantastic. It was a fantastic feeling when they said that, look, we are going to continue with you. Also because every customer seems to have so many choices. Uh, in certain cases, we figured that we sometimes feel that having worked with a customer, they know you a lot better, and hence they might know your deficiencies much better. But then there is no other way around it. And as I said, the fact that they renewed us after working with us for a year, and is a statement of two things. One, that they found us very useful, and the other
Yeah,
part of it
absolutely.
was that uh, within a collection of options they have, we continue to be their best option. Both of them are very, very positive messages for us as a team, and we love it. And we hope that we are able to, in 2025 is the year when we are able to establish ourselves as a operator of choice for for India because that's where a lot of our action is. Asia also, we've been sort of consistently reaching out. I think today in Asia we've got very interesting and good engagements coming up, and we already connected, converted a couple of them, small starts. I hope 25 is a good year for us there as well. So if both of these stories come through, then I think a part of what we started would have fructified and be like a good year for us.
No, that's great to hear. Super exciting. I think we also met a few years ago, and it's wonderful to see where you guys have reached now. So good luck to you and your team. So switching gears a little bit, I just wanted to go back and touch upon the infra sort of required for your solution. How different is it, say, from working with an existing plant versus someone who's actually setting up now?
Yeah, so in any solution that you give, it always helps to have the client understand what you need. That's a fantastic thing. So what happens is when we get into a conversation, a fresh conversation with the client, and then we take a look at their existing plants, we see a lot of legacy systems.
Yeah.
60-70% of the times these legacy systems are fantastic. I mean, we can work with them. There's like a 20%, 30% chance that some of these systems don't have the necessary infra to start using us off the bat, and hence they might have to invest extra to build them up. So when we, and that sort of consistently happens with every engagement, that we go in, they have X number of plants, they tell us to look at those plants and tell us whether we can connect, and we are able to tell them that, look, we can connect to X percentage very easily, and for a certain percentage, we will have to be, we'll have to experiment what works best. But that also becomes the starting point for them, irrespective of whether they finally engage us or not, for them to be aware as to what they need in the new plants. So I guess most of the plants that have come up in the last 2 years or maybe 3 are all plug and play. You can just go and connect and get started. Anything that's greater than 5 years older, there is say a 30% chance that it might require some small additional investment to go, and that's the difference for us. That anything that's new is plug and play.
Right.
And some of the other things but I think it's the kind of thing that we have to solve, because there is a percentage of this projects in India where we want to ensure, or the customer wants a specific problem to get solved, and we want to work with them to solve that. Not 100% of it is solvable, but to the extent we can solve, that's great. It's good for the customer, it's good for us.
Right. So, Mr. Srinivas, you did touch upon the evolution of the regulatory environment. If you want to share your thoughts on that, I know there's been, progress. We have been doing things. There have been PLI schemes for solar PV. There's PM Kusum. So, what are your thoughts on the space?
Regulations is a very vast area. Again, I think both in terms of the amount of time required and the kind of person required to elaborate, I think it would require a completely different setup. Somebody else who's much closer. But as an industry participant, obviously, I have a ringside view and an opinion and a basic understanding of what regulations are. And I think the biggest positive is the fact that the industry has reached a stage of irreversibility from where it's very clear that wind and solar are fantastic sources of energy, and that the ecosystem is there to ensure that these projects can come live and start generating power. Regulations do have the flavor of evolving over a period of time. Somebody might call it back and forth, but they are just adjustments that require. The proof of whether the adjustments are good or bad is from the fact that whether the net impact on the industry is positive or not. And to me, that's been very clear that renewables has grown fantastically with a certain momentum behind it and a lot of tailwind.
Yeah.
And as it continues to grow. And for me and for a lot of people that I've seen, I think there is no confusion as to whether this industry will continue to grow or not, which itself is a positive statement on the regulations. There might be individual conversations, opinions, thinking around whether uh, these regulations could have learned more from the wider, from the other set of countries, or whether they could have been different, something could have been avoided, some iteration could have been reached faster or not. I think um, those are just that. They are like thoughts that maybe we could have done things better and faster. Irrespective, I think when you are able to bring an ecosystem together to operate in a commercially profitable manner, that's fantastic. I mean, that's the proof of whether it's worked well. And not only has it worked well, I think it is also giving a lot of confidence to people that it'll grow. And to that extent, I think they are both fantastic. Individually, whether you might say a PLI or the PM Kusum or something, I think again, they are some of these regulations are specific to certain areas of this sector and are better left to discussions within that interest group to say whether they can be different or not. But overall, the regulations we've seen over a period of time, whether it is the move from FIT to feed-in tariffs to FDRE, all those have happened in a certain logical sequence such that it has improved the penetration of renewables, and that's good. I mean, I have no second opinion on that.
That's great to hear as well. And it's such a large problem to solve for a country like India, which is so varied geographically as opposed to some of the comparisons we may make. And I think we have a target of 500 gigawatts by 2030. The most recent number when I checked was we're at 200 gigawatts now. So that's obviously great progress. Just to something that we haven't touched upon earlier, while we are at these numbers today, what are your thoughts on the transition from fossil fuel generation to renewables?
Yeah, specifically for India, I think what's clear is that we will continue to have a lot of fossil fuel based generation because that's I mean, our energy needs are ever expanding, and while we can, it's fantastic for us to keep adding new sources of power. There is no story where we can phase out a source of power, and so that I think will continue. And uh, part of the story is when does renewable become potentially base load, and that's sort of the story where renewable combines with any storage source, whether something like pumped hydro or batteries or something, and then they become base load and becomes great for everybody to work with that. Uh, but until that comes, I think there will be this, um, this continuing sense that we might need more stable loads of power, which will come from the conventional sources, and the uh, um the variable loads can come from renewables, etc. So that will continue. In terms of finally, will a country like India ever make a transition to only green power? I think that's a slightly more complex, large, and nuanced uh, issue. Potentially, there'll come a time when emissions have reduced enough for us to say that the mix of generation sources are, don't make a further impact on the kind of emission that we see. But as I said, what we've done so far is great, and I think the momentum is towards adopting and transitioning towards more and more renewable electrification. That's good for us.
Right. And maybe to close the discussion, slightly unrelated question, but how are you sort of managing the hectic, chaotic founder life as opposed to, you've been in the more organized corporate life earlier?
Yeah, that's. I think so. When I made the choice of being an entrepreneur at that time, we were in the peak of COVID, and I think uh, co- life during the COVID times gave perspective in terms of the fact that you could do what you could do, but you still had to sit home and wait for things to fall in place. And what you were waiting for was external to you, and the timelines for that were unknown. And parts of that learning are pretty similar. That as an entrepreneur, you can work hard, you can do a lot of stuff, but there are also significant periods of time when you're just waiting for some external thing to fall in place, whether it's a customer saying that yeah you've done good work, or whether somebody validating your product by using it and giving you feedback, and then you're waiting for that to get developed. So I think entrepreneurship is about putting good effort, being relevantly patient, and allowing yourself to relax while everything is so uncertain. And that's been what sort of kept me going through all this period. And these are all internal things. Externally, I think the kind of support system around you always helps. I think whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's the wider industry connect, industry friends, all that sort of helps you. All of them in various ways have always been supportive, and I'm very thankful for that. I mean, if we have been through 4 years and standing where we are, it could not have been without the kind of goodwill that's been extended to us from varying shades of people. Some of them clearly who knew us well and who believed in us. Some of them who only knew us sparingly, but still continue to give us the benefit of their goodwill. And some of them probably didn't even know us, but could sort of see in us the germs of a good organization that could be useful to us, and have encouraged us. All those good, I mean, tangible, intangible stuff and support system helps us to work, and that's been the thing that's sort of kept us going in all of this.
No, that's wonderful to hear. This was an incredible discussion, Mr. Srinivas. Thank you so much for coming here and sharing your perspective on the industry. I'm sure our listeners have a lot to take away from this conversation. I also know that you don't do this quite often, so I'm very grateful for you to join us here. And thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me. Fantastic talking to you. Good luck to you as well for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in today. See you next episode.